We think of pirates as men. Only men were strong enough to master the hazards of the sea. Only men were strong enough to wield the swords and muskets and pistols.
The pirates liked to believe they were heroes, but to doctors, few men are heroes. I was a surgeon, lion or wafer, and sailed with them on many voyages. Some pirates were brave and manly, but many quaked even to have their teeth pulled by my instruments. They were as valiant as sea slugs. Many went into battle, drunk as an English lord in a brothel. They liked to boast they were the brethren of the coast, and the freest, most wicked men who ever walked the planet, or the plank.
But throughout history, there have also been women pirates. The first was Queen Tuta, who from 230 BC sent her sailors into battle against Roman ships. Tuta boasted that the art of piracy was deception, and women could be as deceitful as men. In 1692, a merchant ship sailed out of its harbour in Scotland. The crew were anxious. Sailors hated having women on board. Old superstitions claimed women at sea brought bad luck. But Captain Reed had his wife Rachel with him on board.
The reason was that my mother was already pregnant with me, Mary Reed.
In all the outrageous history of piracy, there were never two more outrageous characters than Mary Reed and Anne Bonny.
Which is why I'm speaking to you before I was even born.
And why I'm not sure after my trial whether I lived or died or married the judge.
Most of what we know of Bonny and Reed comes from Daniel Defoe, the author of Robinson Crusoe. Defoe devoted a good part of his general history of the pirates to their story and the eventual trial of the two women. Defoe knew his public wanted a glamorous romance, so he was less than scrupulous with the facts. More than with most pirates, it's not easy to tell fact from fantasy when it comes to Mary Reed and Anne Bonny. The judge, Sir Nicholas Laws, who eventually tried Anne Bonny and Mary Reed, had known Anne Bonny when she was a child in Charleston.
Defoe made them out to be fearless women, but he never met them, of course. They were thieves and whores. They deserved to die.
I cannot say I remember being born, but I must have been. Born to the swaying of the waves and all the sounds of a ship. There's so much to watch on a ship.
Then one night, Mary's father was involved in a tavern brawl in Cheapside. He had to flee for his life.
After my father fled, my mother decided to seek help from her mother-in-law. I was only 4, but I already realized my mother was very strange.
You're a boy, not a girl.
My mother assumed that my grandmother would prefer a boy, the image of her son, an heir for the estate. So we travelled to Hampshire. My mother was greeted with suspicion, and I was greeted with love. I was going to be brought up as an English gentleman. No one could know the truth, that I was a girl. So I fought like a tiger and devoted myself entirely to the arts of war, which are more exciting than the arts of love.
An English gentleman must be rounded, able to fence with Aristotle and his ideas, and also with brigands and their swords.
I pitied girls who had to play the harp, do embroidery, and coo at birds in cages. When I was 12 years old, my grandmother died. Though I looked a very pretty young gentleman, I didn't inherit a penny. My mother and I had to take to the road. We made for Portsmouth, where my mother drowned her sorrows in gin, and I had to pay for the gin. Portsmouth was a rough town. Sinners, sailors, soaks. There were more taverns in Portsmouth than temples, because all faithful and religious people had sailed for America. The manners of the inhabitants left a lot to be desired. I could see how the women were treated, and so I vowed that no one would ever learn my true sex.
One day, Mary left the tavern.
Take your hands off me.
You're going to join the Navy?
And if I don't want to?
I don't want to have to kill you.
Oh, I'm touched. I just had to let him touch me. To show him I had breasts, and they would have let me go free. The last thing anyone wanted on a ship was a woman who might conjure fierce monsters out of the deep. I don't seem to have a choice.
It was normal then to press gang young men into the Navy. Mary served as a powder monkey, helping prepare the gunpowder.
I had to work harder than the men. In the Navy, discipline was harsh. I was afraid of being stripped and lashed. For 3 years, I loved the life. But then I became bored with it. I jumped ship, and since I could fight, I joined the infantry. I was even decorated for bravery. I liked being a soldier, and I did not want to be a woman for any man. Till Jules Vosquin came to sleep in my tent, and I discovered the arts of love. I sometimes wonder what he had that made me give up my principles and my disguise.
You're a boy, not a girl.
Mary Read and Jules Vosquin left the army.
We bought an inn in Breda in the Netherlands. Soldiers liked being waited on by a woman who had fought battles. They listened to my stories and drank our ale. That could have been the end of my adventures. And then you'd never have heard of me, or of the trial of Mary Read and Anne Bonny.
Anne Bonny was also born around 1690.
My birth caused a scandal, which I approve of. Nothing would have distressed me more than being born of married people in a marriage bed. My father, Will Cormac, drank too much and loved too much. My mother was his maid. They discovered she was pregnant and fled across the Atlantic.
In 1700, Charleston was just 30 years old and the haunt of pirates.
It was a small port growing fat on sugar and slavery. My father grew fat too. He bought a fine plantation. We had slaves, maids, and butlers, like everyone else did. My mother wanted me to grow up a lady, but I did not accept other people's wishes. I certainly had no intention of playing the part of the angelic little girl who smiled sweet smiles.
At least that is the truth. But I remember you were such a pretty child, too.
But then I wouldn't dance. I wouldn't do any of the things girls were meant to do. Would you like me to dance for you, Judge?
Your father despaired of you.
He wanted me to do what he hadn't done. Marry for position and money.
Nothing wrong with that.
What about love?
Was it love that made you stab your maid?
No. But that happened just after my mother died. I ran wild, and I loved running wild. Drinking, gaming, looking at the men like the men looked at me, and dreaming. And I dreamed of the sea, of the sailors, of battles, of cannons, of captains, of the sunsets, and most of all of leaving Charleston. It was then I met James Bonney. If I hadn't been so innocent, I would never have fallen in love with him. I will only marry you if I sail with you.
It's bad luck to have women on ships.
Then you'll never have me.
The captain will kill me.
I fight like a man. Looking like one is not hard.
James Bonney married her and took her to New Providence in the Bahamas, which was then a haven for pirates.
In Providence, Bonney started treating me like a wife. He sailed with the pirates and left me behind. He begged me to understand. It was against the rules that pirates had. The brethren of the coast did not want any sisters. And what they did want, when they were home, was all too predictable. Never bother me while I'm sleeping.
You must really terrify those poor merchants.
As a hero of wicked romance, my husband cut a very poor figure. In this, he was not alone among the pirates.
In the museum at Charleston, the models look fierce, but the truth was that the captain of this crew, Stede Bonnet, actually admitted that he took up piracy to escape his nagging wife.
I was a major in the army. I fought at Blenheim. I tangled with Blackbeard. But none of these battles were as fierce as the battles in my bedroom. I retreated to the relative peace and security of being a pirate.
And then I met Calico Jack. He was a man, and a man with a record of stealing ships all over the West Indies, which I must confess I liked. It was his brilliant idea to use the skull and crossbones as the pirate flag.
Have you?
Not yet. I have you.
Not yet. You fight well for a woman.
You fight well for a man who wears those ridiculous knickers. My terms are simple. I sail with you, Jack. I will not stay on shore bored while you have all the adventures. No one will know I'm not really a man. Only you. I had found my true mate, and we sailed together.
Defoe wrote as if it would be quite easy to maintain the disguise. But in the cramped quarters of a boat, there was almost no privacy.
As a surgeon, I encountered scurvy, gangrene, and the constant stench of too many men on boats that were too small. Chinese pirates, I heard, sprayed their ships with garlic water, but the English sneered at that.
Sailors lived on top of each other.
And it wasn't always a pretty sight.
No one knows whether Calico Jack's crew discovered Anne was a woman, or whether she managed to keep up the pretense for all of the first trip. But then, what happened suggests there was some privacy on the ship.
Jack. I'm pregnant. I had the child in Cuba. But that wasn't the end of my life as a pirate.
It would have been easy to stay serving soldiers, but Jules died. I found myself itching to sail again. I dressed once more as a man and found a ship in Amsterdam that was bound for the West Indies. Jack Rackham, who has gone down in history as Calico Jack, attacked that ship. He did not realize I was a woman, and he invited me to join his crew.
When I got back on ship, I saw there was a new member of the crew.
It took us some days to stumble on the truth, that both of us were women.
At first I thought she had been Jack's lover, but she swore she was not. I believed her. We became friends, and slowly we stopped the pretense of being men. The crew became used to the idea of us as women.
In the early 1720s, Britain made a half-hearted attempt to stamp out piracy in the Caribbean. A new governor was sent to the Bahamas. Woodes Rogers had been a privateer himself and was determined to put an end to the menace. He hung some pirates and then offered others a pardon if they gave up piracy. Calico Jack did not take up the offer. In 1720, he was sailing off the north coast of Jamaica when the British Navy intercepted him.
I hacked at the officers with the cutlass.
I fired pistol after pistol.
But the men let us down. Too much rum, not enough balls. We were Amazons, and they were rabbits. Calico Jack was a sad disappointment to both of us. He surrendered.
We were taken to the courthouse in Spanish Town, Jamaica. The judge, who was to try Calico Jack, was an old friend of my father's, Sir Nicholas Laws. I wasn't sure whether that would help us, or do the very opposite.
I was determined to rid these seas of piracy. And I discovered that Calico Jack had been dismissed for cowardice by one pirate captain. We know you are a coward, Jack. Remember Captain Dane?
No.
I met Captain Dane. He said you had a good stomach for rum, but none for fighting. You did wickedly rob and plunder little ships here and little ships there. Schooners, sloops, fishing vessels, but always little ships full of little men easy to terrify. How say you?
Not guilty.
A succession of witnesses identified Calico Jack and gave detailed accounts of his acts of piracy.
We've heard all the witnesses. They seem very honest and upright. What have you to say? Any witnesses? Any defense to these heinous crimes?
No witnesses, sir.
I'm not surprised.
But I do say this. We never committed any acts of piracy. All our designs were against the Spaniards.
But one sloop was Dutch.
But it didn't look Dutch.
I was ashamed for him.
We thought they were Spanish.
Frivolous and trifling excuses. We find you guilty. Is there any reason why sentence of death should not be passed on you? I ask as a pure formality.
I repent. Anne!
If you had fought like a man, Jack, you wouldn't be hanged like a dog.
Calico Jack was executed. So were many of his men. Then the court turned its attention to the women.
Anne Bonny, I'm sorry to see you accused of these wicked piracies. Were you forced to perform these acts?
By whom? Calico Jack? No man puts fear in me.
I should put fear in you. These depositions prove that you freely engaged in piracy, and that you tried to murder one woman so that she should not give evidence against you.
Prove it.
It has been proved. Here. How say you?
I say I'm pregnant, Judge.
And so am I.
A lie. A lie. Prove it.
You know the law, Judge. A pregnant woman may not be hanged. The child in her womb must live.
You both lay with Calico Jack. You're whores. Thieves and whores.
I like to think that I caused trouble for the rest of my life.
This was once the jailhouse where the two women were imprisoned.
I can hear the heartbeat of the child and feel kicking. I don't believe these whores!
Do you want to listen?
Anne Bonny gave birth to a child. Some historians believe that her father bribed the authorities so that she was allowed to go free. Mary Read also survived. One of the great mysteries of the history of piracy is that no one really knows what happened to either of these colorful women after they won back their lives. It is a story with no end. A story where nearly 300 years on, there are more questions than answers.
Stay tuned for Journeys with host Lauren Miller next here on TVO.